When we kicked off our AI series for our human-centered AI series here at the Business Karaoke podcast, we started with design, super important. We then moved into geopolitics, right? Super important.
As you do.
Yes. Then we talked about cybersecurity, and you're up next. You're up next.
Light fare, cybersecurity,
Exactly.
geopolitics.
And then legal.
Legal,
Right?
True.
So this is the theme of, this is essentially the theme of the day. The theme of the day is not necessarily only AI, but AI or technology and adoption through a legal lens, and leveraging your legal team as an enabler, not those annoying people who keep telling us no all the time and we're not allowed to do anything.
The Department of No.
Yeah, the Department of No. And I thought, who better to talk on this than not only someone who's in the legal field, but also with a deep interest and also background in technology. So with that, Daryl, welcome to the show.
Oh my, what an incredible intro. Thank you. That's setting the bar quite high.
No, so we talk a lot about tech stacks in the world, right?
Yep.
But I've recently come across a term that I have quite enjoyed called a trust stack.
Oh boy.
A trust stack. And I thought, let's chat about this, which is when you're thinking about a technology or implementing a technology, it's not only that you need to trust the data, but it's also you need to trust the algorithm or the company. Like, so for example, let's say you really like the idea of, so even for example, let's go like super personal, I have a personal story. My godmother's hard of hearing.
Okay.
Hard of hearing. And so I was showing her actually this week in the, Meta just launched their glasses where it's, essentially you can read the conversation as in the first scene of Star Wars, right? Like, so it's super cool. And I was like, this is amazing. She's a very social woman. She loves going out for dinner. And so it's really tricky, like when you have so many competing noises.
Okay.
And this is exactly the kind of person that, I thought, yes, I'd love to show her. And then this kind of technology, I showed other people and they were just like, Meta, hard pass. No, thank you. That's a no from me. I'm not interested. So even though the technology is there, this understanding of like the trust is super interesting.
Yeah.
So even the technology is interesting, the algorithm is interesting, depending on who's owning the technology, people are also like, I don't know about that. So when we are looking into the future, right? Looking into the future, we're thinking about adopting new technologies. I think we have to start with trust, right? And understanding that trust is not kind of on and off. It's not the light switch. It's more layered. In your legal tech approach or experience, how do you think about trust? How does it play a role in how you work?
Wow. So, okay. I'm making notes.
Yes.
Making
No.
notes.
I mean,
actual.
This is why
actual.
we do it.
I love the Post-its.
Yeah.
So a couple of things there. So, how does trust sort of impact a lot of the technology usage, uptake, adoption, et cetera, in the legal field specifically? I think that there's two ideas that you sort of touched upon there. One is large-scale corporate may have a black box problem that is much larger than legal specifically. I think that the very idea of knowing enough for an average consumer to ask a question about what are they doing with my data is on the upswing still. In certain corners of the world, people are very, very sharp, aware, knowledgeable, and say, I don't want them to have my data. I don't want the algorithm to start feeding me only things that reinforce my worldview. I want all things, okay? That's, I think, a larger black box corporate issue. There's a second thing in legal specifically, which I think is smaller scale, and it definitely does relate to AI, which is simply what is it doing? What is the technology actually doing? Okay, so I think it's a macro version of the corporate black box problem. To give a bit more detail, in a legal team, and classically up to this point in time in what is called the legal tech field, right? There are these tools and platforms. A very common one that maybe even design thinking interested listeners would know is a contract management tool. I give it a document. There might be some associated data entry. I populate some metadata. I could see who signed this contract and when, and what are associated obligations, and when does the contract end, et cetera, et cetera. I can see what it's doing. I could see all of the steps, and I can verify. Now, increasingly in the last potentially 5 years, but absolutely in the last 2 years, that type of tool that would take a document and populate some metadata and manage really powerful legal obligations is being eclipsed by generative AI tools, AI-enabled contract management tools. The problem then becomes that same person, either legal or the business writ large, what's it doing? I just can't see. I can see my documents. I know it's there. What's it actually doing? That's the sort of a smaller scale trust problem that I think is a big hurdle. And then when you sort of compound that with content generation, document generation in the case of legal, but also content interrogation. So I aggregate all of these contracts, and then someone high up C-suite says, we have some risk exposure in this particular geography. This just popped up, last night, an emergency call. I need to know this information as soon as possible. You can deal with all of your data as like basically a small scale Google. Do you trust the output? Recently we've seen concepts like trust but verify. Absolutely, absolutely critical. But again, I think that the small scale trust problems need to be tackled by knowledgeable people who can kind of say, this is our secure platform. The generative AI is doing ABC. In the case of, we'll call them smaller scale agents, where you can see the process kind of stepwise laid out, and you can indeed trust but verify. You can go back and say, I'm looking at steps 2, 3, 4. I know the data sources. I'm comfortable with the output, and you go right back to your executive and say, here is the output. I've double checked it, it's good. Which, by the way, that exact process, absolutely what you would do if you requested a junior to help you with the exact same work. I know that you're really smart. I trust that you're going to do a good job. I have an obligation to double check it, either as a professional, generally speaking in the white collar world, but absolutely as a legal professional. You may have binding legal obligations to, again, verify the output. If it's your name on the document, if it's your sort of reputation here and something blows up, that blows back on you, not that junior. So.
Yes.
Monday morning.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, that's what it is. It's interesting that you mentioned smart intern, that's just being an intern. We often refer to AI being kind of like your smart intern. One kind of parallel that came up for me as you were kind of walking through the last point of, for example, being able to like produce contracts, for example, at a higher speed and at a higher quantity than maybe what would have been possible. There's some really great things that come up, right? Because that means smaller legal firms that, let's say, are more tech positive, that they don't need necessarily 30 people of discovery anymore, that they've got, that available to them. But at the same time, a little bit the vibe code alarm is going off in the back of my mind. Yeah. And what I mean by that is we have quite a few people coming here to Design Thinking Japan, very excited, very like, hey, I vibe coded this thing, and I want you to have a look at it. And my cybersecurity head and my AI head go, sure, let's have a look. Yeah. And I think, but then obviously that once you kind of like get to the details, because this particular person doesn't come from either a cybersecurity or an AI background, that there's some massive, let's call it gaping holes in the entire solution. Yeah. Despite the fact that, But but again, 10 out of 10 for that person, taking initiative of like, what's our minimum? How can I bring something to life to show to someone?
Yeah.
Maybe using that, let's say, vibe coded app less as a solution, but maybe more as a comms tool for somebody. Be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is kind of what I would imagine it would look like. So I'd love to hear from your background, and I also think it's super interesting, like where legal and why kind of legal has been one of the first so targeted by AI is the fact that AI is most easily trained on words. And there's a lot of words in the legal profession.
So many
There's
words.
so many words.
It's too many. By the way, too many words.
So many words. And so I'd love for you to walk kind of that path of how much is kind of someone, taking initiative and drafting up a contract versus getting help. What's that kind of like, if we're kind of making that vibe code analysis, what's like a good balance there?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let's start with vibe coding a little bit. Either vibe coding directly as it relates to generative AI, or sort of a parallel concept, which we can call increasingly just democratization of some generation. Obviously, in vibe coding case, it can be actual coding of a web page, a small solution, some sort of app, right? In the case of legal or large corporate business context, it is you're generating. You have the ability to generate new content, new document for the business, for your function, for your team. Where that same generation may have happened in a far more constrained way before. Take this exact template, copy it, only change these specific things, or input something and spits out a document on the other side. I think that potentially this is a parallel kind of conceptual process to the trust but verify. If a company does it right and has a generative AI tool and allows a bit more democratization, sets up just some simple guardrails for this document type, produce this general kind of output, otherwise go to town. Whatever you need, whatever your use case is, you are sort of free to customize it as long as it falls within our sort of risk tolerance. Do it. That's not a bad thing. I have, as a user, as a business side user in some company, I have far more autonomy. I feel way more in control. I have a little bit of confidence that the business has set up some kind of guardrail, so I'm generating this basic contract to. A very common example is non-disclosure agreements. Okay, low litigation risk. Nearly no litigation risk. So I can do that myself, right? I'm connected to the process. What then would happen is, depending on the risk tolerances of the company, that document does or does not need to go through some kind of quick review. By the way, as the business user, I don't know or care if the legal side is also using a different Gen AI tool to review that document. Makes no difference to me. But the idea generation, the quick service, the speed of output, and the control and sort of connection to that whole process is only a positive, a huge, huge positive. Again, with that sort of asterisk of trust but verify. That's vibe coding. The wordplay thing is another, what I find increasingly like a fascinating topic, and I've started to sort of take in myself, other interviews and reading content about it. Obviously, as you very well know, the power of generative AI is going to be a lot in natural language, sort of a UI or a UX, right? And language manipulation. There's all kidding aside, there's so many words in the legal. We're doing all words. If we liked numbers, we would have went to business school and would have made a foolish decision to become a lawyer. The other thing is, look, I would argue, and this gets a little into sort of legal specifically, I would argue one of the necessary roles and powerful functions of a lawyer is to be some kind of translator. That can be a huge distinction between, oh, that's a good lawyer, or they just talked for a bunch of time and I don't know really what they said. Some kind of translator of concept into easier concept. Concept on paper into application for you for this specific thing this time. That is a translation function. In law school, at least in American law school, I think it's still taught, should be, is what they call issue spotting. You got all this stuff, remove the noise. What are the important things? To put this another way, that is summarization, that is boiling it down. It is a huge, powerful tool that even the worst Gen AI platform does pretty well. You probably don't need all the words. When someone sends you an email background to set up some inquiry, might not all be important. I think that facilitation of issue spotting, boiling down to key issues, leveraging generative AI in that way is a very commonplace use case today, but still can be used way, way more. The legal field, the practice of law, either serving clients in a law firm or in my case in-house, I think is a playground for this. There's an associated kind of a problem here, which is, is it kind of too much AI, or I would call it a little bit too robotic, literally and figuratively. But I think we'll see that soon enough.
I think that's a great point to pick up on, which is when we think about AI, I personally believe is that one of the worst things you can do is create a department. So this is our AI department. I think this is dangerous because, as you mentioned, if a lawyer's superpower is to be able to say, of all of this noise, I can hone in on this particular thing, and when is that skill more necessary than now, where there feels like there's alarms going off everywhere? So if you can use that lawyerly skill that you've already developed over many, many years, to create meaning for people, application, I think that's super key. One of the things that I would love to see in an organization is not an AI, like lawyer as such, but more like this is a legal initiative driven by AI. It's not an AI initiative or driven by legal, because it's really about having that core knowledge in the driver's seat. And so I like to view it in that way, as in if AI is going across the organization, what's that going to mean for legal? And I have been doing a little bit of digging lately into the whole, this whole AI thing. If we're really going to do it, if we're really going to do this whole AI thing, I was I think it was a couple of months ago, where I was like, we have launched large language models to the entirety of the global population, that have access to the internet at least, and we don't have any laws. Are people going to look back in 50 years' time and say, you bunch of idiots, and be like, you gave the most powerful technology to people in their hands and you had no legal, you didn't set up the legal field to be able to manage what's coming? But then I thought, hang on a second, haven't we always done this? Haven't we always given people something and then kind of followed it along? So with that, I would love to hear from your perspective the idea of, it's not, AI legal, it's about how can we represent the core values of what legal is, which is creating and protecting and structuring better societies, better companies, better initiatives, better projects, driven by AI. And is it okay that we've launched Copilot already? Maybe it is. Haven't we always done it? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's an insightful observation. Maybe it's confirmation bias, because I agree with you. the technology almost always outpaces regulation. The advent of the automobile was this loud, fairly dangerous metal thing that had explosions that made wheels go, and then they put an open box on top, and they're like, this is high tech. And then
Get inside.
Get inside this death thing on wheels. And then over time, they were like, oh, this is hard to drive at night. Maybe a belt for your seat or a windshield, and so on and so forth. Like the early cars compared to even vehicles in the 80s, what an extraordinary leap. And that all is the result of regulation, right? But the technology itself far outpaced regulation. This is exactly parallel. I see it as exactly parallel. I think that there were in the legal field, and I think that you and design thinking Japan have been in a space where you all saw this coming. The recent kind of explosion, quote unquote, of generative AI was not new to you. You all saw this coming. But in the legal field, there were some weird practitioners that were studying, learning about machine learning and generative AI, and they were, all of the real estate lawyers were just like, what are you doing? That's fantasy stuff. That's cartoons. It doesn't matter. That's not real. Jump ahead to now, and everyone's like, oh my God, I don't know. My real estate practice is going to be swallowed whole by generative AI. I need to talk to that guy that I was just making jokes about, that lady that I thought was just like fooling around on the internet. She's the person. They were investigating and dealing with the concepts of sort of ethics in this space, right? Of guardrails on how to distinguish literally what is real, what is not. Things that, today where we sit feel so obvious and so dangerous. I think that the problem of regulation around generative AI will increase in the short term. Obviously, quote unquote fake news, AI slop, that sort of generated content that is absolutely not real, but is being produced more and more in very high volume at a very quick pace. And look, there's by the way, if most people don't, I know that that's generative AI slop. That's fantastic. That's not the point of that generation. That only has to fool a few people, right? And so far, a lot of that stuff is, this person said that, obviously deep fakes, et cetera. This person said this or that. I can't believe that's real. It's not real. It's not real. Are there repercussions for it? Unfortunately, oftentimes today, probably not. But to be aware of and be thinking about these things in the legal field, I think is super important.
Is there any other, for example, we just mentioned like a few deep fakes, etc. Is there any other areas that you're saying these are the fields that, let's say, you're either looking into, or that you have an interest in, as to, hey, we need probably a little bit more work done here? Where are you specifically looking into, hey, as a legal profession, as a legal field, investing a little bit more time in ABC, that's probably not a bad idea?
The one that pops to mind quickly is going to be, and again, I work in-house. I work at a large corporation. Anything around the HR function.
Oh yeah.
Right. It impacts people materially and directly. I think that when we are looking at some incredibly expensive, mega value deal, and we say we don't want generative AI to do all of that from
Yep.
start to finish. That's too much money.
Yeah.
We should have the exact same approach and apprehension to this HR issue, this new policy, this code, on maternity leave, on paternity leave.
Yeah.
I think I might have an AI assist, but I absolutely want to go over that output with
Yeah.
a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
That I should deal with that the same
Yep.
level of scrutiny as that incredibly expensive deal. You know, sort of touching back on I think increasingly this sort of AI slop problem, or it looks, feels, or smells a bit too robotic. There will be pushback, and I think that it's gonna happen soon. At most in the next couple of years. There have been sort of anecdotes here or there of that company use generative AI for this kind of commercial. What's the deal? Why would they do that? You know, people scrutinizing real video that was low quality, where it looked like he has 6 or 7 fingers. Is that generative AI? People will start to sort of push back and be like, I want actual humans for this thing, right? And you know, that coming back to HR generally, man, if you're just an employee at a company, how comfortable are you being like, this whole thing, this whole HR process, completely generative AI powered? I don't know, right?
Yeah. No, there's a lot of interesting data around that. So even, for example, if you think about Microsoft, which is essentially, let's call it like the guardian, the co-signer of OpenAI, right? They're the reason why OpenAI can be anywhere. It's because they're behind, behind Microsoft. They even say 70-20-10, which is 10% is your algorithms, 20% is your workflows, but 70% of AI transformation is going to be your people.
Yeah.
And even, for example, someone like Microsoft is saying that's not like a HR kind of leadership kind of company. Like this is a, hey, we're super into like this AI stuff, and even they're saying that, like, that's where it's coming from. I think that's super interesting. And I also think this is like lends itself into, like when you were mentioning people want to see like certain things.
Process,
or I want this to be AI or not or whatever. I also think that there's this that I like to impress upon people is that it's not black or white. There can be if you think about it from 0 to 100, how much of that would you like to be AI? It doesn't have to be 0 to 100. It can be, let's say 75% of my, customer service inquiries, they're taken by, AI because they're pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But the minute I get some, flag word, fraud, abuse, whatever, I'm sending a person straight in, and I'm not having generative AI touch that, for example. So I think having that understanding that it doesn't have to be 0 or nothing tends to lend itself to then, the big L word, which is literacy, right? Literacy in,
the big L word
is in literacy, as in how can I trust something that I don't know? And I think we can, like, I get on a plane plenty of times. I don't know how a plane works. I know sometimes they go down, like, but
it's Monday morning. Come on, take it easy. It's Monday morning.
But with this idea of like literacy can come through understanding, but I also think it can come through history. I've seen enough times that this works, but in AI, we don't have the history behind it, nor do we have the literacy. So we get back to this legal black box type thing again, like, hang on, like, how do I navigate this?
Yeah, I think that, this resonates with me so much. In my experience in discussions in the legal field and legal technology, and my work in legal operations, I've found, just in my personal experience as a professional, more and more, I feel like I'm fighting an education battle.
Yeah.
That's literacy.
Yeah.
Like, in my function, we often kind of fall back on the easy framework of people, process, technology, right? For problem solving. And I've recently, increasing interest in design thinking. I'm coming back to sort of a layering that with a design thinking approach and being very, very targeted on what is the question, what is the problem, like do not come back to it repeatedly ad nauseum, but play inside this people process technology framework. Supplementing that or in and throughout all of that is, well, for example, the people. I can take a complicated concept and boil it down easily, I think, maybe. I'd give it an easy explanation. Do they get it? Am I checking? This is communication. This is an educational function. Also, this comes up so much recently, but is AI, supplementing and superpowering my job, my function, my output, or is it taking my job? And that's an emotional response. Talking to the people, being aware of that, and being like, well, hang on a second, it's not really, I think that your value is whatever the function that you're doing. I think your value is not copying this data from this email and pasting it into this other form. I think that's not why you went to school. I think that's not what gives you joy at the end of the month when you get a paycheck. But the education around it, and especially the sort of the people focus, I find more and more. I feel like I'm fighting an educational battle, and it could be because, in this sort of leveraging all of this technology, I think we are converted. Like, why wouldn't you use this stuff in the right way, right? And it feels there's this element of like zealotry of just this is I learned it. You don't need to learn everything. Just learn a little bit, and then look what it can do. And you can do other stuff. That's educational. It's not technical. It's not procedural.
I think that comes, and so I'll tell you a personal story. So a personal story was when we first started advocating for AI literacy. I would begin something like, there's this unknown technology in the future that will impact us in ways we can't imagine, right? To which the response was, an unknown thing in the future that's going to impact me in unimaginable ways. Humanity was like, no, thank you. And then I saw someone present AI in a new way. And they said, AI is like, instead of looking forward, let's look back. There was this thing called electricity, or there was this thing called the internet. These are what we call foundational or fundamental technologies. And when you're able, specifically here in Japan, when you're able to help, I don't necessarily want to say guide the witness, but when you're trying to walk with someone on this like co-creation path, going with them with something that they have seen or observed is much more effective than going with something not tangible, intangible, and also like in the future. So if we were to even say something that I think even most Japanese people would be able to relate to, is that you can say, if you go back to the 80s, the people that said, I don't need a computer, no thank you, they're for the engineers, or something similar of that tone, you can see they weren't out of a job in 12 months, maybe not even 24 months, but essentially their career trajectory changed. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on leading with education, particularly here in Japan, but also showing what are some previous mental models we can use that maybe aren't so scary, that can, as you said, get back to the value that you want to provide to people? Yeah.
God, there's so many things I want to pick up there. Generative AI. I've had the luck or pleasure to work with a couple smart people at my current company, properly, data scientists. It's so cool. I love smart people. I I can obviously tell when people say, you're smarter than me. I love hanging around with smart people and like, make your intelligence easily consumable for me, and I like to challenge them. It's so much fun. They have often described generative AI as stochastic prediction models, and just I'm like that sounds so cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, sure. You said it with so much confidence, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. I appreciate, and they turn to me and they say, well, you seem to reflect understanding because you refer to these other more easily accessible frameworks. It suggests to us that you get it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, why don't you use my framework? And because we're PhDs, we're too far down, The easily accessible frameworks, coming back to the educational piece, the literacy piece, I think it's just indispensable. Mm-hmm. No one, even today, inside or outside of generative AI, when people talk about algorithms, I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of people, when they use that word, don't know what it means. Familiar with the fuzzy concept, right? Most of the time, if you give this input, you might have that output. If you have like a general kind of more easily accessible framework talking about cooking, which I know is something that you and I had discussed. If you add these ingredients in this way, most of the time you're going to end up with this type of dish. Okay, I get that, right? So having an understandable framework, I think, is part of the literacy. It's part of the education, and is absolutely necessary. Again, as I just mentioned, I think increasingly these are challenges that I face of why wouldn't you do this thing? Why wouldn't you use this technology? What is it? I know immediately I cannot use any jargon. Not because that other person is dumb. It has nothing to do with their intelligence levels. This is if I want to try to convince you, if I want to try to appeal to some emotion in a couple of minutes, I'm not giving you a primer on generative AI. I'm not giving you a primer on machine learning. I got to use something else. And that is, again, a familiar framework. The other thing you said there, one more point is that technology affects career trajectories, which, again, really, really resonates in the practice of law. I won't give anything away by asking, I don't want to be too intrusive, ask your age, but like I was alive long enough to know an era when there was not email.
So I'm the age where I have to go to the calculator and go 2005 minus 1987. And it says 38. And then I was confused. And I'm 38 now, or I'm turning 38. So that's how old I am.
We had, even, as kids, we had not email. There was a period of not email. There was a period of not text messaging all the time.
Yeah.
Legal professionals had a long period. Many of them are still working. Much, even older than me, more experienced, very smart, had a period of not email. How did the advent and the just explosion of constant digital connection and information manipulation affect them? They still practice the law. They're still working on the same deals. In some cases, they're making more money. They're doing more. They're more capable. I would say that in the example of email, the speed and pace with which they can do certain jobs has increased. It is, to my mind, no different than the generative AI adding a superpower to a lot of other functions today, right? I can now, instead of laboring over writing and typing some letter to opposing counsel, I could type it really quick.
Yeah.
These days, I can click a couple of prompts and have a draft edit, and I'm going even quicker, right? That will inevitably, it is now, but will continue to affect career trajectories across a variety of white-collar functions. I love that concept.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that sounds terrible, but it's actually a
Hit
compliment.
me.
Is that okay? It sounds terrible, but it's actually a compliment. So I, since obviously being deeply going right down the AI rabbit hole, but not necessarily from the technical perspective, but from the legal perspective, from the policy perspective, I was shocked how creative everyone is. I was shocked. This is the part that sounds terrible, but is a compliment. I was shocked that how much creativity and imagination and not only textbooked things are required in the building and the imagining and the envisioning of a society. Now that reflects more on me than the legal profession, but I would love, as we start to wrap up, your thoughts on the role of creativity as that, or what I guess lawyers and the legal profession have always brought to the world, and what that maybe is going to look like.
Yeah. So I love this question because this is one that I ask others quite a lot.
So you did take it as a compliment.
I did. It is. I did take it as a compliment. So yeah, let's spend a couple minutes just talking about creativity in legal and or the generative AI sort of slant to all of this. Up until now, well, let me back up. Let me set up a framework and say, especially for in-house legal professionals, but also for private practice. We don't just know the law. I'm done. I know the law.
Done.
That's useless.
Yeah.
You know the law to do a thing, to enable something. You have either you have a goal in mind, or later you can leverage this knowledge to do something. In the context of a corporation, we're talking about business enablement. What is the goal of this document? Why are we signing this document? It's not for fun. It's for some business goal in mind, right? When you then add in the law says you can't do this according to these circumstances, this situation, then we're going to get to, well, what could we do? I know what it says on paper. Let's now try to imagine some other things. What if we change this word? Does that affect interpretation? It does. It does. I'm pretty sure. Let me figure out those scenarios and figure out how that impacts the legal analysis. That's creativity, right? It is a form of creativity, in my opinion. It is a iterative process that can produce varied and interesting outcomes. I think that, again, in the legal field writ large, there is a lot of this wordplay analysis and so on and so forth. I think that all of this is coming right back to the email framework. I think a lot of this creativity, the capability, will increase in speed. It already has. Anyone who is a YouTube consumer, as I am, I don't know if you are, but every other YouTube commercial is about some generative AI enabled, now you can do it faster, and it's like you have more options, and blah, blah, blah. Generative AI has already and will continue to increase the speed of creativity, not only in purely creative functions and roles, but in other areas like legal. I mean, the ability to suddenly have an always on kind of partner to argue counterpoints, to set up scenarios, to brainstorm and think through things, more than just giving me an answer, allows me to be quite a powerful strategic advisor. Which is often a buzzword in in-house legal functions, but I think that it's this sort of ability is here now, and it is a form of creativity. Frankly, some lawyers don't think it is. They think I'm just doing the law. They're wrong. I do think that this is a creative field. Vibe coding can be an inefficient form of creativity if you don't know how to code at all. And like, look at the thing that I made. You know, kids putting paint on a page and like, it's beautiful. It doesn't work right. But anyways, yeah, I think there's a ton of space for it, and it will only continue to sort of grow.
Daryl, I often like to finish with an AI compass. So I often like talking about AI as you're having your own AI compass, which is helping you navigate yourself through the world. And that compass is not what to think about AI, rather how to think about AI. As in, not like, oh, you know, how to build agents or whatever, not that kind of stuff, but as in like, not AI is good or bad, or this LLM is good or bad. Like when people say, what's your favorite LLM? I'm like, this is like when people ask, what's your favorite ramen store? Like, what's your favorite taco store? It's like, it depends on the person and it depends how I'm feeling, like on the day. If I'm a legal professional, think about that AI compass. What's on that AI compass for me as a really great lawyer in the AI age? How can I navigate the world?
I think that the answer is every legal professional, and by the way, while I am a licensed attorney, I am using legal professional to cover a broader swath, right? So if you are in a legal function, if you're a contract review type function or contract management function, but you do not have a license, fine, I don't care. It is still applicable, powerful, and many times you could be better than licensed attorneys. But coming back to the AI compass, I think it is you have to think about what is the impact of the work that you are doing here right now, and how can you improve or magnify that? How are you using generative AI to improve or magnify the impact of this thing? Could be a document, it could be contract review, it could be giving presentation to internal stakeholders and saying, you know, I need generative AI to suggest ways to give me a tighter summary, give me frameworks that might, you know, resonate with this type of person. What is the goal of the work that you're doing, and how to maximize or optimize that impact? I think that's that is the sort of the guiding question, because that will inform all of the sort of the tools that you might select and how you use them in your daily work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to reflect on kind of where we've come on this journey, one thing that I would love to impress upon the legal professionals specifically, and I mean, if you're not a legal professional and you're listening to this, replace legal professional for your industry. When generative AI supports you in so many ways that you can work faster and better, my question is always, why are people still going to come to you? What can you give someone that's so engaging, that's so valuable, that's so, I know every single law firm in Japan is using this, so they're going to use it, full stop. The question is, I'm going to go to this one, I'm going to go to Daryl because of XYZ. So I really like to people to reflect on what's that thing going to be for them.
Yeah. And this kind of echoes something we were discussing earlier, which is the kind of this pushback against the robots, for lack of a better term. I think people will start actively putting sort of humanity and authenticity first when they are looking for something. If I know all of these 6 lawyers at these different firms are using similar tools, who is actually going to listen to what I'm saying? Who's going to, the human part of it suddenly becomes way more important. There have been voices in this space kind of talking about the likelihood of this. I'm one of them. I just think that the need and import of soft skills against the background of incredibly high-powered generative AI will only increase.
And on that Daryl, thank you so much. You're now a friend of the show. Come back whenever you like. Considering things are changing so much, I mean, we should just schedule one in for like 3 months from now.
It's just like 3 months from now. The machines have taken all of our jobs.
Exactly.
We didn't
forget what we said.
Forget what we said. We were wrong.
Thank you so much. I will send everyone over to your podcast, the Legal Ops podcast, as well, to go and check you out as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cut.
Cut.
Adel does this thing to give me a heart attack every single time where he pretends like it didn't work, the recording.